Welcome back to Building a Fighter. My name is Dr. Austin Shane, sports chiropractor in Scottsdale, Arizona. With me, as always, badass strength coach in Denver, Colorado, Alex Friedman. What up, dude?
Hello, hello. What's up, y'all?
Living the dream over here on a beautiful Sunday morning. And today, everybody, we are going to be talking about the five biggest strengths that are associated with being a combat athlete. We talked about the deficiencies of combat athletes previously to try to be self aware and see what you can get better at. Now, I want to talk about what does MMA and all combat sports do better than any other sport I've worked with. And
Yeah.
Alex, what's our first one?
Everybody could use a little positivity in their life. I think the first thing that combat sports or training at combat sports really builds within a person is confidence, right? The confidence to be yourself, the confidence to handle yourself in a physical situation, right? Which very seldomly happens, but to have that feeling of, okay, I'm safe, right? Or I believe in my capabilities. And you take that as a segue from I believe in my capabilities technically in a kickboxing class or a jujitsu class, whatever. You take that confidence. I believe in my abilities doing X professionally or being a good husband or being a good father, whatever it is, like building that confidence in yourself, right? Which we'll speak to a little bit what we talk about down the road, but like martial arts, for whatever reason, seem to be the hardest to differentiate like my personality and my identity with doing the sport. For whatever, maybe it's a little more inherent because it's only you, or maybe it's a little more inherent because you're only using your body. There's no like implement for a sport or
Mhm.
whatever you have, but like the fact that just training, and doesn't even it has nothing to do with being good, right? Which is crazy. It's that I can do this thing and I can go, you know, work on myself and become a little more self-aware, but also um, increase in my ability level, which is huge, right? And so I think that's the one of the first strengths that we got to talk about. When you start to train combat sports, you become a better person.
Yeah, I feel like that's almost like a twofold right there. Being confident and getting that confidence from combat sports, you 100% get the physical confidence of, okay, I feel safer when I go out. I feel safer
Hmm.
when I'm moving around through day-to-day life, right? I know I can protect myself. It's part of the reason why, like in the future, I always want my kids to start with gymnastics and then go to wrestling, right? You should be able to move your own body in space, and then you should be able to move somebody else's body in space. And then after that, it doesn't matter what you do. Have fun, right? And figure out what you want to do. But those are two skills you should have at an early age to start. And if you don't have it at an early age, you can always get it wherever you're at. So it's better to start than to not learn it.
Yeah, man, and I think that's one of the coolest things about like a kids jujitsu class or a kids
Mhm.
wrestling class, and you know, like it or not, we learned a lot of lessons both mentally, emotionally, and for lack of a better term, like spiritually in a wrestling room,
100%.
right? That's where you learn a lot of your life morals and everything that goes on. And that's something that within this modern area of combat sports or MMA, I hope doesn't go away. Right. That's the special sauce that makes like training martial arts. I think even back to like way ancient Eastern philosophies, right? Like there was no boundary between being good at the martial art and being a good person. Right. Like those are twofold. And I hope that's something that like persists through a lot of this like modernization of combat sports as a sport because it's gaining popularity, it's getting a wider outreach, and like we just got to continue to bring the like the moral aspect or the human growth element along with it because that's all these sports are vehicles to create better humans.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of kids that wrestle aren't going to do wrestling the rest of their life. It's a
Right.
0.001% shot of you getting to, and probably even less, 0.00001% shot of you getting to the Olympics, right?
Hmm.
But what it can do is it can instill those different like lessons, like Alex is saying. And that's something that needs to be stated and it needs to stay because we've talked both of us about the lessons I've learned or the lessons Alex has learned through wrestling that have made us into this position that we're in right now where we can talk to you guys and we feel comfortable with what we're saying and we know that we're sure of ourselves and we have the confidence to speak up for ourselves
Yeah.
in these different situations and know that even if we're not right, we're confident in what we're saying and we think we are right. And here's why we think we're right. Cause that's a hard thing to do. A lot of people don't want to be able to talk. They don't want to be able to express their opinion. And a lot of where our confidence comes from was, hey, it was me on the mat with another dude in spandex with an ankle band around our
Mhm.
like around our feet. Who's gonna win? Figure it the fuck out in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands, depending on what tournament you're at, of people watching you. That's
Yeah.
scary, kinda. Like, it wasn't really scary, but, like, looking t at least to me, but looking back on it, it's probably scary to a lot of people, and that has to build confidence, right? And then the other thing, on the confidence building side of everything, we talked about the physical for the most part, the mental side of the combat sport of knowing you can get through hard shit. And we'll get to this. This is another point that we'll get to later, but I want to touch on it because it does build confidence. Say you do a wrestling practice and it's known for everybody fucking knows. You're going to do 5 goes at the end, right? You're in high school, you have 5 2-minute goes. And then the coach fucking blows his damn whistle and he says, but overtime. And then you do another 4. And that's hard as shit because you weren't mentally prepared for that. No matter how many times it happens, you're like, "Oh, at the end of 5, I'm fucking done. I get to go to the showers, blah, blah, blah." You might be exhausted that day, had a lot of classes. Well, guess what? You have overtime. You gotta do 4 of those. And if you do 4 of those, and you can either get through it or you can dominate it. The good dominate it, and then you get to be done. But that itself, being able to not be prepared for what was going to come, overcome a hard task, and then actually dominate that hard task, that builds confidence. That allows me to be more sure of myself because I know not a lot of shit in my like I haven't encountered a lot of shit in my life that was harder than a Gomez Wrestling Academy practice. There's basically almost nothing that my fucking doctorate was easy as shit compared to like going through a practice when I was 12.
Well, man,
Right.
that I mean, I think that can be summarized in like the old cheesy Dan Gable quote, right? It's like once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy,
Mhm.
right? And it's like there's hairlines of truth to that because, like you said, you prove to yourself, I can do it under these dire physical consequences. I can still function, right? It's like under these dire physical or emotional consequences, I can still function. I'm just going to
Mhm.
keep plodding forward, and I think that's a huge backbone to have, and that's, like, what instills your confidence, is, like, I have this thing to rely on is, like, no matter what is fucking going on, I've been through some harder shit.
Mhm. And so moving on from like the confidence side, another thing combat sports does really well is it's accessible to everybody, right?
Yeah,
You don't have to be like if you want to play in the NFL, you have to look a certain way. You want to play in the NBA, you have to look a certain way. You can be whoever or whatever in combat sports and find a way to success, right?
yeah,
Obviously, there are people that are genetically predisposed for great things, right? You got the Jordan Burrows, you got the Israel Adesanyas. You have those types of people, but that doesn't mean you cannot have success in combat sports if you don't look like them, right? I personally, I'm a 5'9" little Irish kid. I was never gonna make it to the NFL. My dad literally wouldn't let me play football in high school when the coach asked because he's like, "You're gonna get fucking hurt for wrestling. You're not going to make it to college for this. Why would you do that?" But guess what? I could go do that in wrestling. I could go do these different things, even though I was smaller than a couple other people. I learned how to use my skills, my physical gifts, because even if you're not built like a Greek god, like a lot of these NFL guys, you still have physical gifts. You can learn how to maximize those and find your own style. It's kind of like a create your own journey. It's
right.
really, I think, one of the only sports in the world that it's like a create your own story and you can figure out how you're going to be great versus the other ways you have to fit a mold of how to be
Yeah.
great.
No, I totally agree, and I think, to enhance the accessibility thing is, like, anyone can step into a martial arts practice, which whatever it is, combat sports, and immediately be valued, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's another there's such a low barrier of entry, right? If you wanna go play on the football team, right? Well, first off, you have to go talk to the coach, and then you have to try out, and then you have to go get fitted for pads, and then you have to buy cleats, and then you have to blah, 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 right? Literally walk into your nearest Muay Thai, kickboxing, jujitsu gym, take your shoes off, and you're ready to go, right? Like, and even the quality of like practice and attention you get is different, right? If you're a kid that's not immediately skilled in football, I guarantee you're getting written off. Just go get in the line over there, try and catch a ball, right? You're a guy that's not that skilled in mixed martial arts or in, let's say we're starting in a jujitsu class. coach is going to talk you through positions and try and get you to understand the move, right? I experienced this probably the most heavy handedly in our high school wrestling group, right? We have kids from football, they're one of 120. They barely ever get snaps, they're whatever. And then they come into the wrestling team, they're one of 40, and and the coach knows their name, right? Like, it's a big thing for them that, like, oh, Coach Alex actually cares. He like tries to help me get better, right? Versus, we're picking on football, but when you're in a football team, there are a lot of kids and not enough coaches to like foster each kid. And so you're playing a more high stakes games with a larger volume.
Mhm.
When you come to combat sports, it's like, no, everybody kind of sucks when they do this the first time. So I'm not going to treat you any different. Or anybody can choose your own path and get better at this. So I'm going to invest some time and help you understand this because of the like, I don't know, the morality clause or the just like better coach athlete relation ratio, honestly.
Well, you have to be, right? You have to have a relationship with the athletes if you're a coach in combat sports because it is so one of the things we'll talk about later is vulnerable. Like
Hmm.
that athlete needs to trust that you have their best interest in mind because they're going if they are going to compete, they're going to be vulnerable. It's them versus another human on the mat and they need to have trust not just in themselves, but they have to have trust in you. And that develops a better relationship. Like that's why I've talked about it all the time, but I think that jujitsu is kind of like the next CrossFit, where it builds that team environment. You build a family at a jujitsu gym because everybody has to trust each other. At any point in time, you could be rolling with a spazzy white belt, and you can get your ACL snapped. You have to trust that person across from you on the mat and be able to say, "Oh, I trust you enough that we can roll together." And then you're giving them a lot of leeway, which helps develop that relationship back and forth, not just with the coach like we were talking about, but also with your teammates, which is a little different than other sports because it is so I mean, it's a high stakes game of physicality, right?
Yeah.
It's what does Rogan say? It's high stakes chess. That's all
Yeah.
it is, right? It's
With
high stakes
dire
chess with
physical
dial physical
consequences.
consequences. That's all it is if you make one mistake, you might have not have an LCL. You make one mistake, you might not your peroneal nerve just got stretched, homie, sorry. But and all of those different things allow it to be something that develops bonds because of the trust you have to practice safely. And then the last thing I want to talk about on accessibility is it's the only sport in the world where your professionals can be in the same classes as your
Right.
regular people or your I call them NARPs, non-athletic regular people. And that's the nice way. And it's wild because think about Patrick Mahomes going to like a play flag football with some random guys in Kansas City. That doesn't happen.
Or
Yet,
it's a news story.
right, or yeah, or there's a shitload of press there, and Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes are there, and they're doing it almost like for charity. But then you go to your local combat gym, if you go to a bigger gym like Fight Ready, there's times that guys walk in and they're rolling with 3, 4, maybe even 5 UFC guys in the same jujitsu class. And they're just there they're just blue belts, just rolling, it's recreationally. And they
Yeah.
might be in there rolling with guys like Fugit. They might be in there rolling with guys like Kelvin, right?
Well, dude, a funny story based off that. We were at open mat yesterday and like Dustin Jacoby's on the mat, Chris Gutierrez, Brandon Royval, all these guys like top 15 in the world. Right. And like, I just happened to be walking past like some of the seating area or whatever. And some kid, high school kid walks up. He's like, "Are you one of these famous UFC fighters?" I was like, "I'm not, bro, but
But
thanks for
they are.
asking." Yeah, it's like I don't want to like dime these guys out and like call them out right now, but like the fact that like he knows, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna be in a gym that potentially you could have a go with, a Brandon Royval.
Yeah. Well, it was cool because so a random video I saw on I think it was Instagram recently. It was a guy that was at a concert and he was so excited. It was literally he met Sean Brady in line getting a beer.
Yeah,
And he walks back to his girlfriend. He's like, "I just met Sean Brady. He dapped me up." And I'm like, oh, like again, think of another athlete in a different sport that's just he's not got people around him. He's just sitting in line at a concert, grabbing a beer. Somebody comes up to him and he's there. He'll just dap up a dude and be like, "What's up, dude?" That speaks to the level of professional athlete or the level of like normal person these professional athletes have because MMA and combat sports are the everyman sport.
yeah,
Everybody that does combat sports recognizes that is or recognizes everybody can do combat sports.
Yeah. And there's an added level of, like, humility too, right?
Yeah,
Like, as much
right.
as we talk about accessibility, like, anybody like you were talking about earlier, that Spazzy White Belt could take your leg if he wanted, like, that's the like, anybody's dangerous at any point, right? And
Yeah.
so that's, like, the
They don't even
humility of it.
try to be dangerous and they can be fucking dangerous. They're
Right.
trying not to be dangerous and they become
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah, amen. So, no, I think that's huge, and it's, like, again, a really cool experience for people to, like, alright. And there's, like, this inbred, like, sense of, like, camaraderie,
Right.
right? It's like, "Oh, that dude does jujitsu. Yeah, he's at a way higher level, but I'm also part of that."
That's why I
Right?
love that I have cauliflower ears. It's an
Yeah, right.
immediate dude,
Automatic in, yeah,
it's an immediate buy-in. They're like,
yeah.
"Oh, okay, you get it." And I'm like,
It's
"I
fucking
do.
awesome.
You get it
Yeah,
too."
yeah, exactly.
Alex, what's the next part we're talking about?
No, the next one we talk about is, like, on this path of choose your own journey in MMA and, like, accessible to anybody, like, there are a lot of points of adaptation, right? And I think martial arts forces you to adapt more readily than a lot of different sports or a lot of different situations in life, right? You have to be willing to scrap the plan and reorganize yourself for change, right? And that's how growth happens. And it's uncomfortable a lot of the times, speaking on physical growth, mental growth, whatever. It's uncomfortable to kind of accept that and take a new step forward. But martial arts forces you into that repetitively over and over and over and over and over again. Like there's this new iteration of you as a combat athlete, right? Like that's one of the coolest things to see in the UFC. Like once you get to be a good fan, you get to see guys on 2 or 3 different performances. They've made stark changes to their game, right? When they come into the octagon the next time, which I'm not saying doesn't happen in other sports, but it's not like all of a sudden Tom Brady's going to be a more mobile QB,
Right.
right? But you
100%.
see that in the MMA all the time. It's like, oh, this guy's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt and he's like damn near pulling guard his first UFC fight.
Chrome
And
Gracie.
then, yeah, and then 3 or 4 fights later, he's knocking dudes out,
Yeah.
right?
Well
Like
well,
you're forced to change.
or they're not, and they get washed out is kind of
Yeah.
what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah.
In order to be good, not even just elite, but good at combat sports, you have to be a good generalist. I mean, don't get me wrong, you should be a specialist. You have the Alex Paheas, you have all these different things, but, like, you need to learn how to adapt to a bunch of different stimuli. You need to be able to grapple. You need to be able to use your lactate energy system. You need to be able to use your alactic energy system. You have to have a strong aerobic system. You have to be not just strong, but also powerful. You have to have endurance. All of these different metrics, MMA, why I like being a strength coach for MMA is because it is so complicated. There's so many different variables.
Yeah.
I think, the hardest puzzle to crack because there are so many different variables, and
Amen.
that's what makes it exciting. But that's also what sets you up for success for the rest of your life, is because your body has to learn how to adapt to all of these different stimuli. You need to be such a good generalist that it sets you up not just during your career, but as you're done with your career. Of course, you're going to have injuries. Like, you're not supposed to wing your fucking bones as a weapon all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not supposed to be wrestling with another male or female for 2 hours a day, 3 times a week, right? That's not what our bodies were designed to do. But you're better at adapting to stimulus. Your nervous system is more readily available to adapt once you are done with combat sports, and will set you up for success in whatever else you have because you're so physically gifted at problem solving.
Right. Yeah, and that's like the ultimate gold nugget, I think, of like any sport is like how well can you take these like on the field lessons and morals and then apply them to actual life. And like this speaks to earlier, like the inseparability or like the joint approach of like emotional and mental growth with the physical growth. Right. So this ability to adapt in your tactics on the mat and then translates that to your ability to adapt in everyday life scenarios, right? Like I'm having a conversation. Oh, this is obviously not going well. Let me, for lack of a better term, like call it out. It's like,
Yep.
okay, hey, this is like super uncomfortable. Did I say something that offends you or like something like that? Like just being able to like have the confidence and then have the adaptability to change your direction, in a business challenge, in like we talked about relationships, in anything that goes on, right? In a parenting challenge, in whatever's going on in your life, right?
I think you need to learn. I think something that combat sports, this isn't even one of our points, but talking about adaptability is you learn who you are.
Yeah.
There's
Amen.
nowhere for you to hide when you're doing combat sports because you get to see the truest form of yourself when you're in true fight or flight. whether you're
Mhm.
sparring, whether you're wrestling and you're going hard goes, whether you're doing jujitsu comp rolls. Like
Mhm.
once you get to in a jujitsu comp roll, the seventh of eighth minute, and you're going with somebody on your level or higher, you find out, are you going to break or are you not going to break? Who are you as a person? And that allows you to be A, more confident, like we talked about, but be more adaptable to see what do you need to change in the future. It makes it very apparent, not just physically, but mentally, what you need to change and what you need to adapt to in order to either get where you're going or back away and find a new goal, because that's
Yeah.
also an option as well, right? And that's not a bad thing if you have to back away and switch to another goal, but it's something that you need to be understanding of and you need to be able to, I guess, pick out immediately so that you can correct course right away.
No, I think that's a really interesting point that you made, and like something that I experienced recently again this week is like you learn who you are and like how you handle conflict or handle um adversity really well, right? Like obviously that's like one of the biggest lessons we learned through wrestling, but even this Friday, like I was sparring with the pro team and I don't typically spar with pro team. I have no like striking skill or acumen
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
So, but I jumped in there, it was feeling a little spicy and like I've been working on my striking a little bit. I wanted to see what was up. And I found out a couple things, and I even translate this into my grappling.
The way you said that,
I
I
learned
found
a lot.
out a couple things.
Um, but I love being in the place where like we're playing tit for tat, or there's like a tactical, strategical battle going on. That's something that I like expose myself to in jujitsu that I never need to. If I want to in jujitsu, I'm just gonna smother you and I'm gonna stay on top the whole time. Right? I could do that. Can't really do that in striking. But when we're doing this like tactical, strategical battle, I'm having a great time.
Mhm.
And then, I catch it, I hit somebody hard, or somebody hits me hard, and it's like, oh, it's fucking on. Here we go. Like you're trying to like hurt each other. And like I like literally had this conscious thought in the middle where I was like, I could be here. I could do this. Right. Like I have that ability from college wrestling, from whatever. Like I have the ability to live there, but that's not where I want to be. That's not where I enjoy anymore. Right. And these people that are pursuing mixed martial arts, career in the UFC, whatever, professional, that's where they live. That's their jam. Right. And
Mhm.
it's like, it's interesting to have that layer of awareness. It's like, this is not where I need to be right now. I don't need this head trauma. I don't need this ego battle. I don't need to try and hurt somebody, that like I have a hard time drawing that line of like that I care about. Right.
Yeah. You made an interesting point about like how you handle, like I didn't think about how you handle conflict on the mats, how you handle conflict off the mat. And
Yeah.
you made me think about it. That's 100% correct. Like when I'm wrestling, like I'm never gonna like I'm not gonna be the guy that's gonna yell in your face. I never have been. I'm not gonna start a conflict with somebody in person or on the mat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna systematically dismantle you. And that's how I wrestle, right? I
Yeah.
set traps as I go. I allow you to wind yourself up and make your own mistakes, and then I fuck you up. And that's exactly like when I do conflict, if I handle conflict in person, I'm
Yeah.
just going to let you fuck yourself up. I don't need to do that. I'll make you look like it. You can make yourself look like an idiot and then I'll just point it out.
Yeah.
And it's
Right.
funny because it's funny because that's exactly how I handle conflict on the mat versus off the mat. And it's
Yeah.
wild that I've never thought about that, but that does translate into my real life of, oh, that's how you do one thing is how you do all things. And I just learned that through combat sports is that's to me the most efficient way to handle my problems.
There you go.
Cool.
It's 100% like I don't know, maybe not 100%, but it's very transparent, right? Like because I you see guys on the professional fight team that like they have, for lack of a better term, they have the ego battles in the gym. I
Yeah,
have to win every
100%.
go, right?
Yeah.
And then like you watch them in their personal life, it's like, oh, they're trying to win every go,
They do the
right? And it's
exact same thing.
right? It's like they got the cool car, they're living the
Yeah.
life. They have to seem like they're winning every single go. And it's like an interesting parallel of like maybe some other guys that are super humble
Mhm.
and they live that way on and off the mat. So it's we've talked about this a million times before, is like how you live in your personal and your outside life definitely affects how you live on the mat. But it's like some of that stuff is learned on the mat.
Mhm. 100%. And then something else that's learned on the mat is mental
Oh
toughness.
God. Yeah, hell yeah.
And that's number 4 on our list of strengths of combat athletes. I've worked with athletes in every single sport, uh, for the most part. I wouldn't say every single sport. I haven't done ice skating yet, but I've worked with a lot of athletes across the board, and I've never met, on average, any athlete from any sport that is more mentally tough than a combat athlete.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest benefits of combat sports is knowing that no matter what, if you continue to move forward, you're gonna get better. And it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be forward in the same direction. You just gotta keep picking up your fucking feet. You can
Yeah.
switch which way you're going, but if you keep picking up your feet, you're gonna be successful. And I haven't found anything that's better than, I mean, specifically wrestling, but any combat sport to allow you to learn that skill that is beneficial through the rest of your life.
Yeah, man. Like one of the ways that I measure this, or I like see this in my athletes, I never like consciously go there. But there's this like we talk about our thresholds, right? Like our functional threshold and our absolute threshold. I view the same thing. Like when you're reaching absolute exhaustion, there's a mental threshold that happens way before a physical threshold, right? Like that's like an age old thing. Like your mind's gonna quit before your body, right? That's something that happens. And I don't ever really in my workouts want to get to a point where the body quits. Like if I've done that, some shit's gone wrong or you're not
That means your
prepared.
next 3 days are gonna suck.
Right. Or something bad's happened. But mixed martial artists, wrestlers, these combat sports people, they're way more willing than other athletes to narrow that gap, right? Their mental that their thresholds are closer together than a lot of other sports that I see. Like some other sports, like you start getting close and then they're gonna want to start a conversation. They're gonna ask me if they can take
Oh,
a
yeah,
minute.
dude.
They're gonna do this and that. And it's like martial artists are like, regardless of what they were thinking that was gonna happen in the session, they're like, oh, I gotta go. It's go time. All right, fuck, I guess. You know, and they're like just willing to once more into the fray and continuously do that. And I think, like again, like we talk about all these skills, the more they can translate in and off the mat and in a workout in life, I think that that ability to be like, oh fuck, here we go again. Let's put our head down and go. Not oh fuck, here we go again. I'm gonna get fucked. Right? Like we gotta have that differentiation in attitude and willingness. That's like that's mental toughness to me.
100%. I mean, I feel like all of these kinda compound on each other. That's why it was a lot easier to do the deficiencies list than do the strengths list, because the biggest strength is all of these are just one basic thing, and it's just called being a combat athlete, right?
Yeah.
And trying to dissect it down, it's all basically the same, but mental toughness, I think, is the crux of being a good combat athlete. That doesn't mean it has to be trained, right? You get that relatively inherently the more you do combat sports. It gets beaten into you whether you like it or not.
Right.
And that doesn't mean that you have to do the extra gassers at the end of practice. That doesn't mean you have to like show your ego like Alec was just talking about with the adaptability side. Like it means that you know who you are and you're willing to keep moving forward and put your head down and grind. And
Yeah.
I've seen, like he said, like a lot of power athletes, sprinters, football players, all that fun stuff. When the going gets tough, they don't always go through. Some of them do, but a lot of them don't because they're so technically gifted in their sport. They've never had to have mental toughness. No matter what, you could be the most physically gifted person on the mat at all points in time. You're going to get pushed to exhaustion. So you have to learn how to be tough. It's something that no matter what, you have to experience. You're not just going to be out the womb and being Spencer Lee, right? It's not
Yeah.
possible. You have to get to that point. You have to put in the hours. You can be born like LeBron or Victor, what's the fucking big ol' alien dude? Wembyama? That
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
7'2" point guard?
Yep.
The fuck out of here. He
Yeah.
was born for basketball. I bet you he's never had to be mentally tough in his entire life. And that's a stretch, right? But
Yeah, I
he
don't know
was
about that.
no, but he was born for his sport. There's nobody that's born for combat sports. Combat sports find you.
Yeah.
And that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
I'll say I'll take that back. It's not that he's never had to be mentally tough, but he has had a lot less exposure because of the physical gifts that he's been born with, as opposed to even like Jordan Burroughs, who I would say Jordan Burroughs is probably the best American wrestler ever, right? As far as freestyle goes. And the amount of mental toughness he's had to go through, even though he was born predisposed for being very good at wrestling, he still had to develop that no matter what.
Right. No, I agree with you. And I think mental toughness, I like put this in a category of like, once you've learned it, you just have to be willing to continue to access it. Right. Again, to your point, you don't have to continually practice or put more emphasis on that. Like Jordan Burroughs is like going to get a lot of that mental toughness stuff, whether his coaches were assholes or not. Right. And so I think this is a muscle that like once you've developed it or once it's you've been through some of that adversity, it's there. You just have to remind yourself it's always going to be there, right? Like I said this in like a couple of my interviews when I was going for like strength and conditioning internships or whatever, like, you know, Alex, what are your biggest strengths? It's like, well, work ethic is a big strength. Like my punctuality, like I'm always early, blah, blah, blah. But those things are like prerequisites. That's not like something that
Well,
sets you apart. That's
but
something that,
we think those are prerequisites. A lot of people don't have that. That's the
right.
difference. I agree. I think that should be a prerequisite for success.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't see it like that because I've never had to access that.
Well, and this mental toughness being a prerequisite is something that's like, you're not even getting the door without it or with it, right? If you don't have this, like it's a prerequisite to continue your training in your martial arts, adventure, journey, career, whatever it is, right? If you don't have this or have developed it at some point, you're going to be the blue belt that retires. You're going to quit wrestling at high school because it's hard. You're going to whatever. So like this mental toughness is something that like is an absolute prereq, but um is not able to skip. Like you can't not have.
Exactly. It needs to be something that you get from combat sports. And so moving on to the last point or strength that we really truly get from combat sports, and I believe it's the benefit of vulnerability. There's not many other activities or sports in the world that you have to truly be as vulnerable and show who exactly you are than combat sports. Like I said earlier, it's if it's I'm stepping out on the mat at Fargo and there's thousands of people in that arena and I'm going for a place. So there's 4 mats going on. I am one of 8 people that thousands of people are sitting there watching, and it's me versus the person across from me. That's it. That is all that matters. And that's very vulnerable. That puts you,
Yeah.
especially like I joke about it all the time, but you're wearing spandex and you're wearing
Mhm.
basically underwear and wrestling shoes on a mat
Yeah.
in front of thousands of people. And they're either cheering for you to win or cheering against you to get your ass kicked. Like that is the definition of vulnerability to me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think it's a it's a hard place to be, right? Because everything, whether you have success or failure, people, yourself, you're going to ascribe your whole being to whatever that was, right? You're not successful. Ah, it's because I was a bad person, or because I skipped out on sleep, or because my nutrition was bad, or because I didn't practice as hard as I could. And that presence is constantly there. It's not just your physical ability, your wrestling technical skill, your talent, whatever. It's not just that that's on the line. It's your entire person, your discipline, your character, your everything. Like that is also what we're ascribing to your wins or losses, right? Whereas like you look at NBA game, it's like, there were 5 other people and maybe it was an off night and this X factor technically and this and that. It's not like, no, motherfucker, you were partying 2 nights ago and you lost because you are not a good person or you're not a good enough person.
You suck as a person.
Right? But I feel like that's what we do in wrestling. That's what we
Yeah.
do in combat sports. Is
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you lost? It's because your personal habits are not as good as the other guys."
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that is 100% the case. Sometimes the other person is just better than you,
Yeah,
right? And that needs to be, but that's something you learn. It's part
yeah,
of being vulnerable. It's part of being able to be honest. Like I'm a much more honest person because of wrestling and
yeah,
because of combat sports because people have seen who I am, right? It's again, I feel like we mentioned Rogan a couple times, but he talks about he's not worried about how people perceive him because he has thousands and thousands of hours of him online, and you can figure out who he is by listening to him talk. That's why
yeah,
honestly why I like podcasting, because I want people to know it's not just about the information in my head. You should also know who I am. You should see, do you trust me or not? Do you think I'm honest? Do you like me or dislike me as a person? That's
yeah,
all being vulnerable. Well, guess what? Combat sports to me, you get to figure out who that person is by A, how they handle on the mat controversy, but also B, how they handle wins and losses.
yeah, and I think
I don't want to like a good example. You said basketball, right? I will never, as somebody that's in the business owner side of things, right? I'm never going to hire somebody that makes excuses and blames other people. I never will.
mhm,
That's not how you operate. That's not what it's supposed to be. And I truly believe team sports kind of build that. right? If you're on a football team, there's 52 other people that you can blame if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
If you're on a mat, there is one person to blame, and it's you, motherfucker.
Yeah, and that speaks to like a principle of ownership, which I think is huge in combat sports, and like that's where I would take a lot of the vulnerability thing. I think you learn a lot about a person like externally, right? But I think it's more important that you we talked about this a little bit earlier. You're continually evolving your like self awareness, right? Those periods of vulnerability, whether it's competition, this happens in practice a lot too. Like you got to be conscious of what choices you're making chronically,
Mhm.
right? It's like at practice, like I'm being vulnerable because I'm trying to get better or I'm slacking off, right? And there's accountability there. Or like it comes to fruition when you go to competition, it's like I'm got to be honest with myself. I lost that, right? There's no this, that happened, this, blah, blah, blah. And like, and people that do make those external excuses, like they're super easily identified. And then hopefully you have a coach that gets it, right? And they put that back on. It's like, why did I lose that match? Right. Like, and it could be the other guy's just a lot better than me, right? That's a legitimate bona fide reason, but it's not the only reason. There could be I wasn't prepared very well. I cut weight like shit. I blah, 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 right? Like, I think that's really a really worthy investigation into not just how did I prepare and did I do the optimal thing technically, but like how have I been mentally preparing? How have I been like putting myself in the best position to succeed? I think those like repeated vulnerabilities and self-awareness loops and cycles you get into are what develop your character and hit the things down the rest of the list that we talked about.
Well, I have so that we can end on like two quick examples, right? So I had a very similar situation happen between two separate athletes. One was a football athlete, and the other one was an MMA athlete. The
Yeah.
football athlete was a couple years ago. And the football athlete, he wasn't super consistent with training. He was wondering why he wasn't getting much stronger. And if you know me, I'm very honest. So I'm going to call the motherfucker out. And I'm like, hey, like, you can't get stronger if you're not consistent. You need to be showing up every single time, and that's going to get you stronger. And I have this honest conversation with him. Guess what? I didn't see him for 3 weeks because he was pissed that I called him out. That is something that other sports teach. They
Hmm.
honestly, it sounds bad to say, but a lot of other sports, that's the normal response. You get called out, you throw a hissy fit. And then I had a combat athlete recently who was 5, 6 months ago. We were talking about his conditioning wasn't getting where he wanted to. And I just sat him down and he's like, "Why do you think that is? Like, what are we doing something wrong?" And I'm like, I think the exact words I said was, "Bitch, I need you to be a fucking adult. Like, I need you to show up because you've shown up to one in, I think you shown up, I think the number was 2 of 7 workouts."
Yeah.
I'm like, "That's why." And he's like, This athlete, combat athlete, oh, you're right. Like, I need to be better." And immediately it was totally fine. Put his head down. That was the best workout he's ever done with me.
Yeah.
And it was pure ownership and accountability. And that's the
Mhm.
difference. And that's what I think combat sports teaches so much better than any other sport is the ownership and being able to be vulnerable, take criticism very well, and apply it immediately and be adaptable. So we just hit fuck it, all 5.
Yeah, right, 100%. Yeah, I totally agree.
So it was an eye-opening moment, and it's cool to be able to have those different, like, working with the different pro athletes and seeing the top end of every single sport. That's why I love combat sports so much
Yeah,
because I don't think it just makes you better physically. I think it makes you better and more ready for success even when you're done because it allows you to be adaptable, vulnerable, tough, accessible, and allows you to have that confidence to be like, "I trust myself and where I'm going."
100%. It's a personal development vehicle disguised as a sport.
Yep. Hell yeah. So those are our top 5 strengths that you can get from combat sports. If you guys got to get in touch with us, all of our information is in the show notes. That's going to be Instagrams and emails. If you're looking for strength and conditioning programming, we have all of those, all of our different options available at buildingafighter.com. We have preset options, custom options, membership options, and then we also have our team option where if you have a gym and you're say a jujitsu gym that has a squat rack in the back, Muay Thai gym that has a couple dumbbells, we will help you build your fitness program and set you up for success so you can start maximizing your weight room and making money off that equipment you may have bought 3 or 4 years ago. So all of that again is at buildingafighter.com. It's Dr. Austin Shane,
Alex Friedman.
and we are Out.